area.
A board charged with identifying and making available all records related to the assassination of President Kennedy presented its final report yesterday to President Clinton. Following the meeting, members of the Assassination Records Review Board spoke with reporters outside the White House. Their comments are about 15 minutes.
We have presented to President Clinton this morning the final report of our work, which details our experiences in 4.5 years of hunting for, searching, locating, reviewing, and releasing to the public the records of the tragic day in Dallas of November 22nd, 1963. It is a voluminous file, and it is there with remarkably few redactions and available for the American public now to review in its entirety. We have had an extraordinary experience as the first group of outsiders who have had the authority to order declassification of government records, particularly intelligence and law enforcement records. And the President gratefully received our report. We were very happy with the support he gave us throughout this entire effort, and it is an effort unprecedented in American history to have outsiders reviewing significant and sensitive government records and ordering release of virtually all of these materials. Anyone else?
I'm Anna Nelson. I'm a member of the board, and I teach history at American University. It was a great interest to me to be on the board because I'm someone who, because of my field of study, has used freedom of information a great deal, and it was very interesting to work for once to get documents open. I think what we've done is really enrich the historical understanding of the period from 1961 to 64, when the Kennedy era basically was in the country's political center. And we've gone far beyond the assassination itself in order to put it in some sort of a historical context. It's a very valuable collection, and I want to emphasize the fact that to have 4 civilians, or 5 civilians really, who were able to declassify documents. The agencies could not stop us from looking and declassifying. If they did not agree with us, they had to come to the White House, focus the mind to have to do that. Why, we really were a unique body and had some very unique experiences, and we hope that we have convinced people in the government that it's not dangerous to allow records 30, 35 years old to be in the public view.
I'm Kermit Hall. I'm Dean of the College of Humanities at The Ohio State University. I really would like to send 2 messages to you. The first message is that the President warmly embraced our report, spoke enthusiastically about the need for openness in government, confirmed the wisdom of appointing the board in the first place, and underscored the necessity of committing the United States government to a long-term policy of opening records to the American people. And the second is to remind all of you that while the board is going away today, its work continues. The echo of our efforts will be heard literally for the next decade or longer. But it also depends, since some of these documents have been postponed in their release until the year 2017, and in some cases earlier, it depends on all of us to keep the people who are in the agencies feet to the fire, so that when those dates come for documents to be opened, that they don't shirk their legal and constitutional responsibility, and really the moral responsibility that's entailed in our actions in making sure that the American public has the opportunity to come to terms with the issue of whether or not its own government participated in the murder of the President of the United States back in the early 1960s. So I would urge all of you, as time goes by here, to remember that the legacy we present to you is the legacy of openness and accountability in government, and it needs to be sustained over time, no matter how difficult circumstances may become.
My name is Bill Joyce. I'm an associate university librarian in the Princeton University Library. Today is our last day after 4.5 years of effort to form a research collection at the National Archives that is still growing and has now attained the size of over 4 million pages. This material not only sheds light on the assassination, but on the entire period. That is to say, the context of the Cold War is illuminated in unprecedented detail, as is the inner working of the government in a very tumultuous period in our history. This collection will be years in the mining by researchers, and it will take a very long time to augment understanding and to develop new, more informed interpretations of what the importance of the period and the events that occurred during it. Another part of our work and the legacy, one of the more important of our legacies, is the precedent of what we have done as 5 outside board members charged for the first time in American history to release records of the federal government that were previously restricted. We have developed procedures and policies that might be applied to other important issues, other controversies that have arisen in terms of government behavior, and we hope that the policies and procedures that we have developed might be applied and adapted whenever necessary to help resolve these controversies, and at the same time to increase openness in government and, as Kermit Hall just said, to make government officials as accountable as possible. And it's up to us to keep the pressure on now that the board has gone out of business, to see to it that the obligations that have been undertaken and the promises to release records are fulfilled. Thank you.
Have any questions for us this morning? Yes, go ahead.
Can you tell us if you learned about the atmosphere of secrecy that led to this whole problem with the records in the first place?
We have to remember that this event occurred during the height of the Cold War, and for that reason, all records virtually on this event were sealed. All the CIA's records were sealed. The FBI records were sealed, many for many, many decades into the future. There was a penchant for secrecy, a desire to close everything off in the name of national security. When the board reviewed these records and applied its balanced judgment, we found little reason to continue to protect these records. In fact, many of them we found really should not have been protected during the 1960s. But we do have to remember the era in which this occurred, an era which national security concerns were heightened and caused the sealing of all of these important files.
Based on the materials that you've seen, have you been able to draw any conclusions about who killed President Kennedy?
Well, I have to say first that our mandate was to find the records wherever they were. So to the extent this was an investigation, it was an investigation into where the records of the Kennedy assassination were. And we found records in every nook and cranny of the federal government and many records in private hands. We did not find, at least in my view, records which conclusively proved either that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman or that there was any particular conspiracy involved. The records do, however, document the CIA's extensive search to see whether there were links to Cuba or the Soviet Union. They also document the FBI's extensive search to see whether there were links to organized crime. They provide tantalizing hints in those directions, but in my view, nothing conclusive to shake the foundations of the original theories.
Jack, if I could just add something to this, if I may. I think it's worth remembering that we've had over 500 books written on the subject of the assassination of President Kennedy. All of that work was done without the benefit of approximately 5 million records, which have been released in the space of the last 2.5 years. I think that all ought to make us very sober about more extravagant explanations of the assassination. In any case, what will occur now is the opportunity for people, no matter what their views are, to come to the materials in an honest and approachable way, and for critics to really exchange views. The other is worth noting in this regard is that the board made a valiant effort to secure records from Belarus and also from the former Soviet Union, now Moscow. We know, Jack and I and our former executive director went to Belarus, we went to Minsk, we met with the KGB, we saw the records they have. It's about a stack of about 5 feet. We weren't able to get those records out. Our relationship with the Belarusian government at the moment is not the best and hasn't been the best, but more fundamentally, those materials we believe are really essential to understanding Oswald and his life. Really 2 years in Minsk was intensively followed, under surveillance. The most personal and intimate details of his life are contained in those records. And we would hope over time that the Belarusian government and our State Department and National Archives or somebody can work out a deal to get copies of those in the National Archives. We also know, and we feel very strongly, there are additional materials that are held in Moscow, and we would hope again that through some efforts we would be able to get those materials into our work as well. We didn't have quite, I think, the level of success we would have liked to have had in working with the Department of State, but I know that over time that they'll give an even greater effort to helping us in that regard.
One of the problems that arose with the investigations, to answer some questions there, is that each time a group investigated, the Warren Commission, the House Select Committee on there was a Rockefeller Commission, the Church study, the Frank Church's committee, all of these investigations then took their records and hid them, put them away, closed the door on them, so that in addition to the general suspicion of the agencies was a general suspicion of all the investigations. And these needed to be released, and that's something else. In fact, our statute required that we look at each and every one of them and release them, and for the most part we have. We obviously protected names of people who might be in jeopardy in various small things like that. But I think that was a very important part of the suspicion, the fact that nobody ever investigated and then let anybody ever see the records they used to investigate.
Are you saying the Warren Commission didn't have all the information?
No, the Warren Commission had only 18 months, and they took what was given to them. They took the records the CIA brought them, and they took the records the FBI brought them. And they concluded, they were asked to conclude very quickly, they were asked to conclude so that the country could settle down. There was a lot of, we know now from records in the Lyndon Johnson Library and other places, that there was a great concern that there might be some element of intrusion on the part of the communists, for example. So the idea was to quickly get it over with, and they moved very quickly, and 18 months wasn't quite enough time to go out and do their own kind of investigation.
In short, after 4 years, where did you leave things, and what's the next step?
Well, I think the next step, I think we'd all agree, is for people to use that collection. It is very, very well, there's a database. It's the first collection in the National Archives that has such a wonderful database. So it can be searched on the net. And if people will use the collection and will start putting all the pieces together, conspirators generally don't write it down. But you can create a mosaic. You can create, from these records, hopefully, as Kermit Hall said, a sense of what really happened rather than speculation of what might have happened. And I think we all agree that we hope that some of the records that we have noted should be released in 5 years, some in 10 years, should be monitored to make sure they come out. And that people should look very closely to keep that mentality of openness around.
I think I'd just like to add that I think it's important to record that the board concluded its work. We reviewed the records that we were able to identify. We surveyed the agencies very carefully. We were able to review all of the records of the various government investigations. So from that standpoint, I think we can say that our work has been concluded in that respect. However, there are still the likelihood that there may be yet additional records that may have been misfiled, they may have been misplaced, they may have been misunderstood. There are, in addition to that, records that were redacted, for which the redactions are to come off sometime between now and the year 2017, when all of the records are released. And we want to know that there is an advocate, now that we're going out of business, that there can be continuing attention to make sure that that information is released as it's scheduled to be.
I think just a quick follow-up. What will go on now is the extensive work of going through these files by individuals who are qualified to review them carefully and make conclusions from them. I think that our legacy hopefully will also be that through this new and unique method of reviewing records and ordering release, that maybe we will have taught some of these government agencies that it is better to be open than secret in many cases, and that perhaps some more trust can be restored to a public that is weary of lies that government may have made to them in the past.
You said that one of the key findings of your committee was that there needs to be more openness in government, and you said the president endorsed that today. Do you see any irony in the fact that your meeting with the president took place in secret?
Well, no, I don't see any irony in that. You know, the president graciously made some time available on our schedule because he wanted to hear about our report. I know he's got a busy schedule today, and while we have tried to do as much of our work in open as possible, we've conveyed to you really everything that was said by the president and his strong endorsement of our report.
Did the president indicate that he might be helpful in trying to pry some of these documents that might still be being withheld from these agencies?
I think he certainly is interested in helping get release of the foreign government files that we've been trying to find. The issue was for a while on his agenda with President Yeltsin earlier this month, but conditions there really made that request impossible at this time. He is very supportive of the opening of these records. His executive order demonstrates that on declassifying records more than 25 years old, and he indicated he would continue the push for opening the records of the federal government.
Add one thing. If I just wanted to say that the records of the board itself constitute over 300 cubic feet of material, and there is a great deal of information that up until now the investigations of the assassination have been secret. Those records were classified, they were put away. Our records are out and available for the public in addition to the collection, and people can evaluate our effort and see just what we've done and make their evaluations accordingly.
And I would hope that all of you who, the next time a story comes about the assassination, have the good sense to realize there are now more than 4 million documents dealing with it that relates to some of the most secret activities of the government of the United States as they figured in the assassination, and not let yourself be pushed around by people who have very complex and very exciting ideas about the assassination that may not necessarily have those rooted in the most current and most valuable materials that have been released with regard to the assassination.
Thank you very much.
Copies?
Over here.
Copies?
Yes.
You want to read it in the morning.
Oh, do I?
Actually, it's an interesting report.
How much was all copies? How much of the history was squashed because of the person? Oh, you got one? That was your